Hello, friends, and thank you for joining me again today. This is kind of a follow-up to the video on God's judgment related to the Maui fires, and he gave me some extra context to understand what's happening in the world today. If you look at the battle that's happening between the elites and how God is judging and why he's judging and in what way he's judging, it'll help you understand better what's going on. All of this is deeply embedded within Scripture as well, as we'll see. But Revelation 2 talks about some of the churches, spiritual states of the church, and mentions that Balak places the stumbling block of sin before the congregation. So if we look at the elites on the religion side, and you can apply that to many denominations and churches in the Christian religion, but also within, the synagogues and even the Muslim faith. So Balak is directly responsible for that. And Balak in the Bible was a king, and he set out to try to put a curse on the Israelites. And so he hired a prophet named Balaam to curse them. And every time Balaam tried to curse them, the most beautiful blessing came out of his mouth that the Lord had put in there. And Balak was really angry with him and asked him, "Why won't you curse him? I'm paying you to curse him." And he said, "I can't do it. The Lord put this beautiful blessing in my mouth. He changed my words. I can't. It's impossible for me to curse them." So Balak figured out that if he gets the Israelite men to sin, that the Lord will judge that, and that will curse them. So Balak sent women among the men to seduce them, and the very first one that did seduce them was Cosby, the original Cosby Show. Now Balak's tribe was called the Midians. Kind of sounds like Midianites, right? Midianites. So anyway, Balak's job and how he operates is to get you to sin. And when you sin, God's going to judge that. And so it's going to make his job at moving you around and being able to rule over you much easier when you're within God's judgment. Your eyes, they're blinded, and your ears are stopped up from the sin that you're doing. You can't tell what's going on. Okay, so that's part of it. And our world is ruled by Balak, partially. Now his cousin is Amalek. And Amalek, when the Israelites came through the Red Sea, when the Lord parted the Red Sea through Moses, they came through the Red Sea, and one of the first things to happen was a group of people attacked them and tried to murder them, wipe them off the planet. And that's Amalek. Amalek is evil. He just wants to kill. He's bloodthirsty. So we see Amalek in the wars that are fought, in the just completely sheer evil that happens. Suicide bombings. Anytime there's massive bloodshed, that's Amalek. And in places like Israel, Israel's kind of in a transition right now. Benjamin Netanyahu had a bill passed that removed the reasonable clause from its Supreme Court, which basically said that the Supreme Court could strike down laws that weren't reasonable. And he did that because there was a rabbi called Schneerson, and Schneerson was asked sometime in the 1950s, what a messianic kingdom with the Messiah would look like, in contrast to a 20th or 21st century rule, in our modern times. And Schneerson said that basically the Messiah will change things, and at that time, what's absurd today will be reasonable. And so if we look at what's reasonable today and we flip that, if you take away what's reasonable today, they think that's going to lead to, there you go. Well, Schneerson also pushed something called the Noahide Laws. The Noahide Laws, at the base, assumes that during the Messianic kingdom that the Messiah will set up, that defying God's moral law will result in immediate judgment. And I believe that wholeheartedly during the Messianic kingdom, though. So Schneerson and a large number of religious Jews are pushing something called the Noahide Laws. And this is what Israel is preparing to do. The Noahide Laws, if you violate them for murder, for stealing, it's punishable. And the maximum punishment is capital punishment. It's actually by beheading, interestingly enough. And you can imagine that they view Jesus as an idol, as a false prophet. So essentially, if the Noahide Laws were in effect today, if you believed in Jesus, you worshipped idols, and they could chop your head off. Now, it's not law yet. And so, where there may have been good intention in assuming these things, and a lot of Jews assume that the Messiah will bring these things, to fruition. I agree with that. He will. But what we have is a world that's run by Balak and Amalek. And we can really see this in the debate in Israel with apostate Jews and the religious Jews, Haredim. And so you have the heads of Israeli security services that are coming out and saying the Messianics are evil. I mean, that's pretty hardcore for them to say that. The Messianics are evil because they want to implement these laws. Well, the heads of the security state, our CIA is also involved in that, are doing really evil things themselves. And those things that they're doing that are murdering or, whatever the case is, sexual deviancy, all of those things are also punishable by death. And so where the cousins of Amalek and Balak were kind of tag teaming, if you will, in the administration of the world governments and what have you, where there was kind of how can I say this? They would kind of tag team each other, and there was a balance of power. That balance of power will not be there whenever Balak is ruling, if they're able to get through the Noahide Laws, because the punishment for any of these stealing, for sexual deviancy, for any of these things that are being promoted, is punishable by death. So that's why the head of Israeli security is calling them evil. Not that they are evil, but they're being led by evil. And who knows that better than Amalek? Amalek knows Balak. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the Maui fires. There's a lot of speculation as to who started the fires. And of course, I have shown that the fires were the judgment of the Lord. But how was that administered? How did that come about? And it's come out that a lot of very strange things happened there. Like the water was shut off. Firefighters were unable to fight the flames with water because the whole water system was shut off. Police blocked the exits and people couldn't leave. Children were let off school early and their parents were, not all there. And so a lot of kids burned up in this fire. It's very horrible things that happened. A lot of weird things. The government's acting very strange through all of this. But the water, the person responsible for the water, she said that water, I believe it's a she, they said that water is godlike. If you really think about that, if water is godlike, well, do they believe that fire is godlike? Think about that. Water is godlike. Is fire godlike? Well, if they think that fire is godlike, were children who were burned up, would they be sacrifices? Maui was a false fire god. That we know. Lahaina, the name Lahaina, refers to the cruel sun, S-U-N. That is the literal translation. And it used to be the capital of Hawaii. And these people who believe that water is godlike and potentially that fire is godlike did things that caused children to burn. It's under a new name, a different name, but that's, that kind of practice has been done by people who worshipped sun gods, the cruel sun, by sun gods like Baal and Moloch. They sacrificed their sons to Moloch. We see this in Deuteronomy 32, which I had read to you. And I'll go ahead and pull this up. Because it provides a lot of context to all of this. I suggest you go read about Amalek and Balaam. Read Revelation 2, read Deuteronomy 32. You can start in Deuteronomy 31. And I'm going to read real quick from Amos 5, verses 18 through 20, and then 26 is also relevant. So it says, "Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness, and not light. As if a man did flee from a lion, and a bear met him, or went into the house, and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark, and no brightness in it?" And I have to pull up Amos 5. And we'll go verse 19, 20. Okay. Verse 21, I despise your feast days, and I will not smell your solemn assemblies. So in all of the churches where they're trying to implement these Noahide laws as law on the land, this is man trying to do that. And you can see that if man is trying to do this and Amalek and Balak are leading the church and the state, well, if you have a theocratic government, it's going to be led at the top by psychos. Okay, verse 26. "But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and Chuan, your images, the star of your God which you made yourselves." And we see this star in this, what they call the Star of David. If you do any kind of review, the Star of David is not tied to David. On David's shields were the menorah, which are the 7 candlesticks. And if you go to Revelation 2 and 3, the church is described as the 7 candlesticks for a reason. But if we look at what's happening with the Noahides, well, the Noahides were written by a man named Maimonides. Maimonides is the father of Kaballah. He had a medical oath for doctors, which at its core pretty much says that you can do bad if you're doing good. If you're doing the will of God, it's okay to do a little bad. And it sounds good, but in practice, it's not. Just like in Kabbalah, Kabbalah is taught within most Jewish congregations, but only the light side is taught within those. There's a very dark side. If you think of like the yin-yang symbol, the lighter side with the little black spot is taught within the synagogues, where the darker Kabbalah is practiced within Freemasonry, especially within the Shriners, and really all of the Mystery Babylon kind of feeder organizations. The ruling elites all practice Kabbalah. Okay, now in Saudi Arabia and Mecca, the Muslims, they walk around a big black cube. And that black cube is called the Kaaba, Kaaba. And who do they worship at Kaaba? Allah. Now let's all say that together 3 times fast. Kaaba Allah, Kaaba Allah, Kabbalah. Kaballah. All right, Maimonides was the father of Kabbalah, who wrote the Noahide Laws. And he also had his medical oath. I'm going to go back and read from Deuteronomy 32, but before I do, if you've seen a video on Peter Hotez, where he makes these crazy claims that about the vaccines or COVID and all of this, he makes some pretty bold claims, but a lot of people don't know, but he wrote a book called Science Tikkun. Now, Tikkun Olam is a Kabbalistic idea that is taught in the synagogues, that if you can do the will of God, you should do it. And the practice of doing the will of God can include things that aren't good. So you can break God's law. It's for the good. It's basically what they say, Now, if you're on the lighter side, you're not thinking, well, I can murder if it does God's will, because that would break one of the 10 Commandments. But on the dark side, in practice, well, if water's God-like, see where it's going? Now, those children that died alone in their homes, these same people like to say that kids belong to the community. And so in ancient days, the parents would sacrifice their children, to Moloch. And today we're seeing, well, there are a lot of sacrifices that are happening that it's just innocent blood. If you really want to understand how they use sacrifices, I would look up in YouTube. Louis Farrakhan had done a sermon, I guess, on Hiram Abiff, Hiram Abiff. And Hiram Abiff was supposedly the chief architect of Solomon, who built all of these temples. Okay, now they're going to say it's a temple of God, but Solomon built temples to Moloch and all these other things. And as the story goes, Solomon, helped build all of these temples, especially the ones to Moloch, using demons. So if you see Louis Farrakhan talk about Hiram Abiff, which you can see in YouTube, then you'll see that the blood of Hiram Abiff, that the magic is in the blood, so to speak. And so he basically makes the case that the black people are descendants, are the sons of God, basically, and that their blood holds the key, that they are going to build it. Now, Farrakhan himself is a Shriner, and so he's comes right out and says that this is a secret practice within the Masons, the Shriners. To become a Shriner, you have to be a Master Mason, and the ritual that they have to do that reenacts the killing of Hiram Abiff. And if you look at things like George Floyd, things really start to make sense as far as what's going on. Now, in the protest movement around Netanyahu, originally, there was a group called Black Flags. So in Muslim eschatology, the Mahdi, who Farrakhan also talks about, but the Mahdi, M-A-H-D-I, rises up and slaughters millions of Jews in Jerusalem. Well, this protest movement that has members of the highest level of Israel's government have raised money and have identified themselves as Black Flags. Kaballah. See where this is going? Okay, so we have Balak, who's getting close to working in the Noahide Laws in Israel, and we have Amalek, who's like, wait a second, you guys are evil. Who are we really dealing with? You start to see where everything's going? Okay. So, Deuteronomy 32. They provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations they provoked him to anger. If water is godlike, is fire godlike? They sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods who they knew not, to gods that came up newly up, whom your fathers feared not. And who is Maui? They didn't know Maui. Their fathers didn't fear him. Of the rock that begot thee, thou art unmindful, and hast forgotten God that formed thee. When the Lord saw it, he abhorred them. Because of the provoking of his sons and daughters. Because of the provoking of his sons and daughters. Black Flags in Israel rose up the same time COVID did. Black Lives Matter rose up at the same time COVID did. I can't breathe, said George Floyd in the reenactment of the death of Hiram. I can't breathe is what they showed on television. Isn't that interesting? And when the Lord saw it, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. And he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be. For they are a very froward generation, children in whom is no faith. And the rise of the Black Flags is all kinds of degeneracy, and it's just plain evil. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God, and they provoked me to anger with all their vanities. I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. For a fire is kindled in my anger, and shall burn unto the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with their increase, and shall set on fire the foundations of the mountains. Lahaina was at the foundation of a mountain. Now, was it a what do they call it, directed energy weapon that started the fire? I don't know. Could have been. Even if it wasn't, if it was lightning that struck, which wasn't raining there at the time, that caused the fire, the water was withheld because it was godlike. So the fire was moved about with the winds. And who moves the winds? God moves the winds. So ultimately, if it was orchestrated, God allowed it. Why do you allow it? And why is he warning us? They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. Sorry, let me go back to verse 23. This is important. I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend my arrows upon them. And if you read in Psalm 18, it clearly states that God's arrows are hail and fire that's going to rain across all of Earth. Now, NASA, they said that they blew up an asteroid, and they're going to blame this fire and hail on the asteroid being blown up. And that'll work for a little while until the mountain of fire falls in the ocean and takes out a third of the ships. But when a third of the trees are burned up by this fire, then we'll really see God's not playing around. They shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat, with bitter destruction. I will send the teeth of beasts upon them, with the poison of serpents of dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. I said I would scatter them into corners. I will make the remembrance of them cease from among men. Were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, unless they should say, our hand is high, and the Lord hath not done all of this. Well, the Lord didn't do the fire. The Lord didn't cause the hail and fire to rain down. That was NASA. For they are a nation void of counsel, neither is there any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them, and the Lord had shut them up? For their rock is not as our rock, even our enemies themselves being judges. So, if the Noahide laws are implemented by men, well, aren't we made in his image? And the Noahide laws, if they're judged by men, makes me think of Noah Harari, who said that humans are now hackable animals. And he was a study of Hebrew at Hebrew University of mankind. And so if the Noahide laws are implemented, who's going to be judging them? They're not following God's word. How could they judge fairly? They don't even abide by his word now. For their vine is the vine of Sodom and the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons and the cruel venom of asps. And it sounds like the vaccine to me. Is not this laid up and stored with me and sealed among my treasures? To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. Judgment belongs to the Lord. And through the burning caused by the hail and the fire, these judgments that are coming across the whole earth are going to do great destruction, but they are at their very core corrective. Because the God that created everything wants no one to suffer. And he does allow these things to happen because he is a good God and a just God. And he wants us to repent and to truly follow him. So I hope this helps you understand what's happening in the world today. God bless you. Goodbye.